Beyoncé Carter Knowles is one thing, and that is a fashion girl. And there is no bigger indicator of that notion than her looks throughout her Renaissance tour live performances in 2023 that happened around the world. My name is Luke Marr, and this is HauteLeMode, and today on HauteLeMode we are going to be breaking down some of the looks from Beyoncé's Renaissance tour. We have a lot to get through and a lot to discuss, and with the upcoming Renaissance tour movie coming out on December 1st, I wanted to talk about some of the outfits just in case Beyoncé doesn't have enough time to get into them herself. Now, as the tour plodded along from country to country and from city to city, Queen Bee pulled out look after look that we hadn't seen before. And they weren't just any old bodysuit or headpiece either. Each of them had been designed by luxury fashion houses that ran the gambit from household names like Louis Vuitton to Ferragamo to Alexander McQueen, as well as including smaller brands that only the fashion fold would be clued in on, like Arturo Obligero, Coperni, and Brandon Blackwood. And anyone that knows even an iota of what goes into prepping a performer's tour wardrobe would say there was an insane amount of work going into that tourdrobe, as I'll call it. And in today's video, we'll be breaking down some of the most meaningful and fashionable looks from the tour. Now, before we can actually talk about the looks, I think it's important we address why this tour happened, and that was a celebration of Beyoncé's 7th album that was released in 2022 called Renaissance. Now, the album was described as an escape for Beyoncé during the COVID-19 pandemic and shutdowns, and she also said that her intention was to create a safe place, a place without judgment, a place to be free of perfectionism and overthinking, a place to scream, release, feel freedom. It was a beautiful journey of exploration. The album features 16 songs with hits like Break My Soul becoming a smash hit, while others like Cozy gave us a TikTok viral dance trend imitating a Renaissance performance incorporating robot machine arms, possibly a nod to Alexander McQueen's iconic number 13 collection, while fashion icon Grace Jones appeared on Move. The album is meant to make one move and groove, and the flashy beats that change from song to song make those who love her work bounce as they listen, or type as they write the script of the video, in my case. And the influence for these bouncy bops comes from a range of places, with house music being a major foundation for the sound. House music actually started in the 1970s when DJ Frankie Knuckles moved from New York to Chicago to play his sets at a club called The Warehouse. For 5 years, he spun records that brought a new sense of music that really brought a dancing sensibility to the club, and it became so popular that the genre became called house music instead of the warehouse music. The history of house music has been whitewashed over the decades, as has been an issue with many American genres of music, but many black artists have reclaimed the genre over the years as well. Now, another large influence on Renaissance was black queerness, as not only was the late DJ Frankie Knuckles an openly gay man, but Beyoncé showed deference to queer nightlife and the ballroom scene of New York that was spearheaded by black and Latino trans and gay people. And while the most famous aspect of ballroom culture is voguing, I have a feeling that the importance of fashion to the scene might be a major influence to Beyoncé's Renaissance tour outfit, and the refusal to be seen in the same look more than a few times. We also can't forget that this album is rather personal to Beyoncé, as it was dedicated to her late Uncle Johnny, who introduced her to house music and designed some of her first dresses. Her mother, Tina Knowles Lawson, spoke about how Beyoncé revered her Uncle Johnny as a child and how heartwarming it was to see so much of him in the album. And the last thing about the Renaissance album I want to note before we begin our fashion excavation is that the album's cover has Beyoncé posed on a plexiglass and life-size horse wearing a crystal creation by designer Nusi Quero that exposes much, but not all. Upon first look, many might see the nature of the dance album and immediately associate the look with Bianca Jagger's famous sitting atop a horse entering the legendary club, Studio 54. But there has also been the association of this exposed aesthetic with the famous 14th century story of the British Lady Godiva, who, as legend goes, rode nude on a horse with only her hair covering her to save the people of Coventry from her husband's extremely high taxation. We might not know exactly what the album cover is referencing, but all in all, the Renaissance album already is layered with references and inspirations for fashion lovers to pick up on, and let's get into the actual Renaissance tour though. We should first start with what I think will be the most iconic look to come out of the Renaissance tour, which is the Loewe catsuit, or catsuits. Now, this is one of the looks that Beyoncé wore during the opening night of the tour in Stockholm, Sweden back in May, during the European leg of the tour. And like the first line that Beyoncé speaks on the Renaissance album, she pull up in these clothes look so good. The catsuit is gold and covered entirely in high shine crystals done to purposefully reflect the light, while black gloves with sharp but potent red nails reach across her bust, pelvis, and upper ankles, almost like they are grabbing for her. And seeing as how she emerges from a large silver clamshell, it might be a reference to the famous The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. Now the look is by Spanish brand Loewe, whose Northern Irish designer Jonathan Anderson has spearheaded a creative renaissance of his own at the brand, as well as making it a commercial juggernaut in the process. Sounds like Beyoncé. The style is a new take on a similar dress shown on the brand's fall 2022 runway, which might be a reference to the surrealist haute couturier Elsa Schiaparelli, whose work with artist Jean Cocteau saw trompe l'oeil hands embroidered onto jackets, while a pair of black wool gloves had trompe l'oeil nail varnish in a bold red, while another pair by Schiaparelli had long gold fingernails attached, similar to the pointed version sitting across Beyoncé's body and also her own hands. And yes, she did wear a pair of black crystallized gloves that had those same deep red sharp nails sitting at the tips. Now I have a feeling the Schiaparelli gloves were definitely an influence, but maybe the association between forward-thinking nail art and the black community in the United States could also be a part of the inspiration. The image of Beyoncé wearing the catsuit as well as her hair blowing behind her feels rather familiar, not in the sense of something we've already seen, but in the sense that it feels natural to the performance levels of a certain caliber that Beyoncé Knowles Carter has become known for. Beyoncé would wear a similar version of this catsuit while she was on the American leg of her tour in Houston, with all the same details and elements except for switching the background gold for a seductive red. And speaking of red Loewe catsuits, there was another look that she would go on to wear during her Los Angeles show that also took reference from the fall 2022 runway, as a red style with short sleeves had what looked to be a faux body motif running in tandem with the proportions of Beyoncé's own body, again with fake gloves that would glide underneath her bust and down her side. Now, while some may see these styles as sexually explicit and raunchy, Jonathan Anderson actually described that the fall 2022 collection was actually inspired by feminist art, which was an art movement that started in the 1960s and continued into the 1970s, and featured the work of artists like Judy Chicago and Eva Hess, but as it moved into the 1980s and 1990s, artists like Carrie Mae Weems and Helen Chadwick continued the movement. Artist Suzanne Lacey would describe the goal of the feminist art movement as an attempt to, quote, influence cultural attitudes and transform stereotypes. But the movement also began at a time where women's rights and queer rights were beginning to be pushed forward in the United States, which might also tie into the queer and women-centric notions of the Renaissance album. While I can't find an exact reference for the catsuit, it could be a mixture of Helen Chadwick's Labor series, which depicts nude women printed on objects like baby carriages or plywood pyramids, but like the Loewe catsuit, they're faceless. And another amazing element of the catsuit is the bra piece that looks like two balloons in a bright chromatic red, which not only taps into the craftsmanship of Loewe, but also could reference feminist artist Louise Bourgeois' famous tits sculpture that showcases two breasts linked together as one object. Anderson is a layered and nuanced designer, and in reality, Beyoncé is a layered and nuanced artist, making them two pretty kindred spirits in creativity. So it really only makes sense that Beyoncé and her team would choose the fall 2022 collection as a strong and solid reference point for one of the handful of images that will encapsulate this era of Beyoncé's work. While the gold catsuit will definitely go down in history, and the red versions as well as the other red version most definitely are up there as most iconic, I think, amongst all the Beyoncé Renaissance Tour looks. And while I could definitely talk about the Loewe looks for quite some time, I think it's important we also look at each of the looks in the context of the specific acts that each Renaissance Tour performance follows. And we'll start with the opening act, which is where Beyoncé would perform songs from earlier eras and albums. Now, the aesthetic of these looks runs the gamut, with everything from more stellar catsuits to flowing gowns to textural timepieces, which meant she could include the work of quite a few different designers, and she did. And that is what is so amazing about these opening acts, that she could command custom variations of designers' work in such a large volume. Now, Beyoncé, unlike many other modern artists, has kept a certain mystique about her that seems to be something long gone in today's day and age. While her work suggests elements and ideas about her personal life, she is rather private and controls her image very, very tightly, almost like the stars of times gone by, like Katharine Hepburn or Princess Grace Kelly of Monaco. And that energy that she keeps seems to make even some of the most exclusive and famous luxury brands in the world happy to work with her on these custom creations that most other celebrities could only dream of conceiving for their biggest moments like the Oscars and the Grammys, whereas Beyoncé is wearing them for sometimes singular concerts and sweating in them. Aren't those outfits lucky? Now, let's look at some of her Alexander McQueen custom creations, with the first being a catsuit adapted from Sarah Burton's Fall 2023 collection for the brand. Now, from the tip of the mock neck of the original to the hem of the dress, it was covered, and I mean covered, in bugle bead embroidery that will have been hand done. Now, as for Beyoncé's version, its lower neckline was supplemented by the fact that it had a full pant element added to it, only furthering the luxurious nature of its creation. Now, the catsuit seemed to have kept an element of the vein-like shoulders, as Burton's inspiration for the collection was bodily anatomy. But with an added hip ledge and padded shoulders, it helped to exaggerate Beyoncé's natural figure. As she began show after show, more Alexander McQueen looks would emerge, like a bodysuit version of the original catsuit, with custom boots and sunglasses in the same color scheme as the original crystal and bugle bead style. But another look from that Fall 2023 collection, a red embellished dress, was adapted from a maxi length to a courteous cocktail span, furthering this handcraft notion. And inlaid was a reference to an iconic Alexander McQueen collection, the Fall 1998 show titled Joan of Arc. Now, we actually created a video dedicated to that collection if you'd like to see it, but in short, it was an ode to the famous French medieval warrior, Joan of Arc, whose bravery and cross-dressing in knight's armor in order to serve on the battlefield made her a famed historical figure. Alexander McQueen's notion of showmanship mirrored Beyoncé's own, as his finale look was surrounded by flames in an ode to the way that Joan of Arc was burned at the stake for her supposed transgressions. And the finale model of the Fall 1998 collection and a few other looks featured blood-red bugle bead embroidery dresses that were seemingly cut on the bias to give them a liquidity, but also placed with swinging fringe in order to give a sense of movement. Now, Burton's adaptation of the look added layered fabric swags that dripped down the hips and pelvic areas, and with Beyoncé's skill and agility as a performer, they showcase a similar movement. Now, I can't help but also notice that there seems to be constant nods to ideas and moments of queerness throughout history when looking at these styles, but not in overt expressions, but rather subtle nods. And yet, at the same time, Beyoncé does not let these garments wear her, but rather they are adapted to her aesthetic and physique so wonderfully. Now, another important brand that Beyoncé wore quite a bit of during her opening acts was rather unexpected, or at least in the way it was worn, was rather unexpected. Tiffany & Co. is known for its creations, of course, but they are usually sterling silver earrings, bangles, and bracelets, not full-blown custom fashion looks. And yet, it's Beyoncé, so should we really be surprised? Now, Beyoncé has been working with Tiffany & Co. since 2021, when she and her husband Jay-Z fronted the brand's About Love campaign featuring a range of famous Tiffany creations and Jean-Michel Basquiat painting. Now, since then, she's continued to be a face of the brand, and it seems that they've even gotten into creating custom garments for the tour in celebration of their relationship. Now, the most notable bit of Tiffany & Co. house codage came in the form of a Tiffany blue mini dress designed in collaboration with British designer Giles Deacon. Now, the patent leather mini was of course seen in the iconic Tiffany blue that has existed since 1845 and had a sharp angular neckline that jutted up from her bust. Now, this neckline also perfectly showcased the custom twisted necklace that sat around her neck, showcasing once again that expensive and handcraft clothing isn't the only thing Beyoncé commands, but custom high-end jewelry for her performances as well. Now, another Tiffany look saw Beyoncé wear a mesh dress that is covered not just in crystals or diamonds, but rather whole strands of diamonds by the yard pieces originally designed by the famed Elsa Peretti for Tiffany & Co. One of these bracelets with a singular diamond in the center can earn you up to $2,000, but Beyoncé is dripped in multiple strands of chains and diamonds that look as if they are held up by themselves rather than the sheer illusion mesh underneath. Now, something about this dress might also allude to the famed images of Beyoncé from her Dangerously in Love album art, where she is dripping in shiny stones as well. I think it's so important to note that Tiffany & Co. is not a clothing brand, and yet Beyoncé had them creating custom looks just for her performances, and well, I think that has to mean something. I also couldn't help but notice how many gowns Beyoncé wore during these opening acts, with everyone from Valentino to Marc Jacobs to Rabanne to Tamara Ralph to George Obika getting to put their shine on the megastar. But one thing that I did notice aside from all of these rather established brands was the nods and support of emerging designers that really would only be known within niche circles of those who follow and love fashion. Now, one that really stuck out to me was Brandon Blackwood, whose accessory designs have captured the fashion industry, but like Tiffany & Co., though, isn't widely known for creating evening wear. He launched his brand initially in 2015, and in 2020 his simple but sweet bags that read "End Systemic Racism" helped to launch his brand as buying from Black-owned brands became more prominent in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And since that initial flood of business, he has built out a range of handbags with styles like the Kendrick trunk to the Nia bag, as well as developing an apparel and shoe range too. But for Beyoncé, he created an icy blue gown in what looks to be an organza based on the way it reflects the light, with matching gloves and shoes. Now the dress drapes along her waist and has a high slit that allows for a solid amount of movement, which again is important for her performances, and as she sits on her mirrored piano, the gown flows like a cascading river down to the floor. It's pretty minimal in terms of silhouette and embellishment. And Beyoncé and her team are conscious of working not only with some of the biggest brands, but also emerging designers, and recognize how this can uplift their businesses as well. And some other designers of interest that were highlighted were Iris Van Herpen, whose futuristic 3D printed and laser cut styles always tantalize. And when the sheer dress with wraparound collar and bountiful sleeves emerged, it helped to push forward this idea of an alien superstar, which is one of the hit tracks on the album. London-based designer Robert One created a custom black jacket and asymmetrical skirt featuring some of his brand's signatures like his blossom ruffle that outline the jacket's edge, while the ridges running horizontally down the jacket and the flood of pleats on the skirt elongated Beyoncé's silhouette. She also happened to wear this look while in London, only furthering this notion of supporting fashion talent as she trekked across the continent of Europe. And her look by Paris-based but Spanish-born designer Arturo Obejero brought a gothic yet sexy feeling to her opening act. Obejero's work focuses often on his Spanish heritage, starting with the uniform of the famous bullfighters of Spain, but usually adding in references to the traditional dress of famous flamenco dancers, which creates long and lean lines. His work is perfectly tailored, as we can see in the sharpness of the asymmetrical neckline that he created, which fits in with many of the necklines we have seen thus far, but totally stands out. And even though it's a strong silhouette, he understands the need for her to perform just like those famous dancers of the 20th century flamenco style. And so the corset that stops short of the pelvis and is covered in black lace, which flows down the front to create a floor-length gown, incorporates that respect for heritage and respect for showmanship wonderfully. I also wonder if the use of lace here is a reference to the line lingerie, reflecting off the mirror on the bar, from Alien Superstar, as lace is often a textile used in lingerie styles. And I can't get over the black lace headpiece that, like a beautiful disc, sits upon her head because, well, people just don't respect headpieces anymore. And again, that's where Beyoncé truly shines. She gets a headpiece. I could go on and on about the looks worn during the opening acts. There are just so many, and they truly all have such a beautiful flair to them. But unfortunately, the video would be as long as one of Beyoncé's Renaissance Tour concerts, so we can't. But I have to shout out a few more really quickly. The Carolina Herrera hooded styles are to die for in both black and red. I love them. While her dedication to dangerous footwear was evident when she wore platforms by Nina Ricci by Harris Reed and Kiki boots by Marc Jacobs, I can't stop staring at the crystal gown in blood red that she wore by Ferragamo, an ode to the iconic red crystal look from Maximilian Davis's debut collection, or the Andreas Kronthaler for Vivienne Westwood off-the-shoulder bodysuit. Opening act, delivered. The next section of the concert is called Renaissance, which makes sense as this is where the album begins to really shine. With songs like Cozy, Alien Superstar, and I'm That Girl playing through this part, the outfits that are attached to it make quite a lot of sense. The show goes on to showcase clips that are reminiscent of the famous 1927 futuristic film Metropolis, where lifelike robots exist, and Beyoncé recreated that robot when she donned a replica of an iconic Thierry Mugler haute couture look from the brand's fall 1995 show. The look sees Beyoncé covered in silver chromatic armor like plates that cover her head, her breasts, and hinged knees, almost recreating the famed robot from Metropolis. Now, Beyoncé is far from new to referencing iconic Mugler runways. In fact, she was one of the earliest adopters of the nouveau idea of vintage being the coolest and most exclusive thing. In 2007, she had designer Eddie Yang recreate a robotic look for her performance at the BET Awards, and while it might not be a direct reference to Mugler, it's funny to see that more than 15 years later, she can get the brand to recreate the original Mugler look to her specification. We also have to note that in the original BET Awards performance, Beyoncé has her armored style automatically removed as part of the performance, and that idea is recreated here on stage as well, as the Mugler look is systematically stripped away. It's also amazing to see an artist reference themselves in ways that actually update and modernize their work, building upon it rather than just rehashing it. It's rather similar to me to Miuccia Prada, who is considered a designer's designer, as in she is so widely respected for her work work and ability to modernize her own lexicon. And Beyoncé is similarly a performer's performer, as so many performers show respect and deference to her. But this idea of looking forward and to a more futuristic nature is funnily enough continued in a Courrèges bodysuit that was designed by Nicolas de Felice. Now, de Felice has brought the French fashion house, known for its futuristic designs that were essential to the zeitgeist of 1960s fashion, into a much more modern context. And this look based on the fall 2023 collection is just one example of it. The silver sequin bodysuit has a sheer mesh that allows one sleeve to look as if it's completely separate from the rest of the garment, while at the center of her stomach sits a circular mirror plate. Now, the concept for the look is based on de Felice's interpretation of how we are attached to our phones and process things around us through our mobile devices, rather than engaging with our actual environment first. Hi, insert name. We more than likely have a parasocial relationship, almost like this Courrèges look. Seeing as how there are so many elements of technology and the future embedded in this module, or the concert, it's an intriguing notion. And I can't help but notice that a mirror is mentioned only twice in the album, once during Cozy, which says dancing in the mirror, kiss my scars, and another again in Alien Superstar that goes lingerie reflecting off the mirror on the bar. That's the thing about Beyoncé. She is precise in her work, and her clothing throughout the tour seems to bolster notions and mentions throughout the album, and well, I love it. I love a reference. I really do. Scanning that goddamn album every single time that I saw a look. Now, another Robo-inspired look comes from Balmain, designed by Olivier Roustan, who Beyoncé has collaborated with rather substantially over the years, most recently putting together an entire haute couture collection alongside the brand. The collection, titled Renaissance Couture, has a look that is inspired by and named after each of the songs from the album. But besides these looks, Roustan created a multi-plate bodysuit that seems as if it was screwed onto Beyoncé, which, in the context of Metropolis, actually follows the aesthetics rather closely. While I can't say that it's my favorite look, I can absolutely see it fitting in right alongside the other styles we previously mentioned. And there were a host of other silver looks, like a gathered Lanvin bodysuit in silver based on the brand's Resort 2024 collection with gold hardware line cutouts, a Zygmunt designed bodysuit with Elizabethan-inspired butterfly wing veil in a flashy silver, and what looked to be almost vein-like strips of reflective fabric wrapped throughout, and a fully crystallized Philosophy Lorenzo de Serafini bodysuit that on the sides had a darker set of crystals to contour her body. The Renaissance segment seemed not only a way to introduce the audience to the songs that had yet to be performed, but also as a way to reintroduce Beyoncé's lexicon of fashion styles that coincide with this newfound freedom and expression. We then move into what is called Motherboard, which more than likely is a double entendre, with a motherboard being described as a, quote, printed circuit board containing the principal components of a computer or other device, with connectors into which other circuit boards can be slotted. But also the use of the word mother as a reference to herself being called mother in colloquial terms by her fans, and sometimes even other artists that have come after her. Now, the looks from Motherboard have quite a wide range of aesthetics, but the one that I think is rather pertinent is a look from the Ukrainian brand Frolov, who Beyoncé has worn in the past. Now, the look is another silver chromatic style, but in a dress form. And after a certain amount of time on stage, the waist of the dress is removed and exposes a sheer panel covered in embroidery that looks like wires and strands of metal, almost like a motherboard on a computer. Isn't she smart? And the bright red heart that sits over Beyoncé's also might be a subtle indicator that even though she might be seen as robotic or machine-like in the way and manner she works, she still is human and has feelings after all. This is like fashion therapy. I love it. And the idea of technology and machinery doesn't fade after that. There were looks by brands like Robin, whose chainmail styles, which originated in the 1960s, and are reimagined in a gown form made up of silver paillettes that are placed closely together at the bust, but then thin out to expose Beyoncé's waist, and then cluster together again as they move down the body. Another comes in bodysuit form with a black leotard sitting underneath a large, sharp, and angular metal sheet that twists and turns at different parts of the body. This look is by British designer Gareth Pugh, who has also been seen as a possible successor to Alexander McQueen because his collections often have a theatrical and dark tone. Now, Beyoncé has worn Gareth Pugh quite a few times before, but this particular metal experience seems to have been based on metal sculpture tops from the spring 2018 collection, except they shone in silver now rather than gold then. Not only do I think pieces like this change up the idea of these metallic styles for the better, instead of silver and gold dress after dress after dress after dress, but they also must have some sort of learning curve when it comes to performing in them, which I have to admire. Something like this might constitute the same skill as a model who is asked to wear something rather avant-garde, which also leads me to wonder if there isn't a layered nod to the first black supermodel, Danielle Luna, who appeared in the fashion parody film Who Are You, Polly Magoo, wearing a silver sculptural ensemble in the 1960s. Now, something about Beyoncé's understanding of fashion history on a level many of her contemporaries don't, purposefully, would lead me to believe that I'm not off on that reference. There were also references to man-made elements, which were a nice detour from the on-the-nose machine referencing, like a duo of David Coma looks, which were based on the brand's Spring 2023 collection. And the fact that Coma himself often finds inspiration in the mixture of oil and water that he sees on the street. So like the swirling pools of natural and synthetic liquids coming together, Beyoncé wore printed dresses in both minty blue and deeper blue with matching coinciding metallic boots and jacket. She also wore a full custom look by Rick Owens, whose work is rather gothic and dark, but also so incredibly exciting to see on Beyoncé. The first thing everybody will probably notice is the thigh-high boots called the Spartan Waders, and are actually gladiator sandal versions of his now famous Kiss boots. As for the clothing that Beyoncé wore, we saw a chiffon cape that flowed beautifully as she walked, but kept itself attached to a pair of alien-like shoulder pads that jutted straight out and up to create a rather peculiar silhouette. But at the same time, that abstract shoulder shape is what helps to build an otherworldly and dreamlike look for Beyoncé. We can also see that she wears a black sequin leotard with a deep plunge, which many might not attribute to Owens, but in reality each of the defining qualities of this look, from the shoulders to the sheer cape to the sequins to the boots, can be found in the Spring 2022 collection. But for Beyoncé, Rick Owens adapts his more avant-garde ideas to fit her needs, which from what I hear about Rick Owens is actually not really something that ever happens, because he has a full look policy, so you don't really get, to do whatever you want with looks. You gotta wear a full look. Now you're probably asking, Luke, what does this whole look have to do with motherboards? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that the Fogachine collection, which is this collection, was a reaction to the desperation and desire to party when we as a society were not yet entirely out of the woods regarding COVID-19. Rick Owens was quoted as saying, when it looked like things would be opening up and people would be going back to partying and everything, that made me a little uncomfortable. And Fogachine is mocking that hunger a little bit. And in a weird way, while Renaissance is about wanting to celebrate and lose oneself in a post-pandemic world, I find the use of a look that was a response to that inclination and almost a chastisement of it as an intriguing dichotomy. Also, it's almost an external display of an internal struggle Beyoncé might have had about coming out of the pandemic with a party album herself. Maybe? I don't know, but I thought about that one for a really long time, so enjoy it. But in a less reflective way, we also saw a slew of pink fashions during the Motherboard performances, from feather headpieces and sequin gowns from Valentino, to a metallic Acne Studios ensemble made up of a bodice, brief, and dragging coat, as well as another butterfly reference found in a Delcore outfit, and I loved getting to see printed ensembles by Tongoro Studios, Versace, and Pucci as well. Now, Motherboard is still a little bit of an enigma to me in terms of some of the costumes, but regardless, it certainly gave us some exciting leads into Beyoncé's style mindset. Next, we saw the segment titled Opulence, which actually takes a bit of a break from the Renaissance album and rather features a range of songs from Beyoncé's past discography. But the overarching theme of this section of the concert seems to be an army, according to those who attended said concerts. I am not one of those people, I apologize. And that sentiment would line up with Beyoncé's looks throughout the section. The most on-the-nose nod to this army and military aesthetic is by Beyoncé's own brand Ivy Park, who created quite a few custom styles throughout the tour run. Ivy Park was started in 2016 in collaboration with Topshop, but eventually in 2019 she decided to begin working with German sports giant Adidas, and that partnership remained strong as they produced pieces that Beyoncé wore, like the sparkle camo styles in a Renaissance clothing drop. Another style that might have been seen as army related but seems a little bit deeper than that is the black leather Dundas ensemble that emerged, paired with fishnets, garters, and a black patent leather military style dress uniform hat. Now the hat was emblazoned with a gold B on the front as well, obviously signifying Beyoncé's status as the head of the army. Now it could be a reference to the Black Panther Party, which was an activist group that was started in 1966 as a resistance to the over-policing of the Black community, but branched into social programs that further helped the Black community as the years went on. And Beyoncé did reference Black Panther iconography in uniforms when she performed Formation at the 2016 Super Bowl, which is also included in the Opulence section. Based on the hat, I wonder if there is another reference to the queer community inlaid here. Now the gay leather community has been one of the most forward images in mainstream media when it came to early gay representation, and actually came out of the motorcycle biker subculture that stemmed out of the end of World War II in the United States. And while for a long time the leather community was overwhelmingly white and homonormative, it eventually began to open up to the Black gay community as well, so much so that in 1984 Ron Moore was crowned International Mr. Leather. And seeing as how Beyoncé is rather in touch with her references, I have a feeling that this Dundas look and a similar silver version might be a wink wink, nudge nudge at another queer community. Two bedazzled bodysuit looks also emerged in this section, one in a deep red and the other in a vibrant blue, and both being covered in 40,000 crystals was all attributed to the brand Off-White. Now, Off-White was founded by the late Virgil Abloh, but since his passing, Ib Kamara, who is also the editor-in-chief of Days magazine, has become the image and art director for the brand. While this might not scream army-inspired, Off-White has been playing with camo prints since at least its Resort 2017 collection, and the straps that run down the front of Beyoncé's torso and come down to her matching boots could reference paratrooper uniforms which have straps attached to the body in order to bind one to the parachute that will deploy. The looks were inspired by the Fall 2023 collection, which saw trompe l'oeil prints and decorative details of straps, and even a few looks made of nylon, which was actually utilized during World War II in order to create, you guessed it, parachute harnesses and suspension lines. So bam. Army reference here. Next up, we had Diesel by Glenn Martens, who also had a duo of looks in this section, as the designer has reinvigorated the denim brand in recent years. The first look we saw was a jersey bodysuit that was printed to imitate denim, the house's signature and plaything of Martens, in a light gray that emphasized every curve and swerve on her body rather effortlessly. It probably originates in the Fall 2022 collection, and like many of the other costumes we saw, it was covered in crystals as well, which differs from its use when donned in war. Shocker. I know. Now, denim was used officially in the US military starting in the 20th century, and like many of its counterparts that we just mentioned in this video, like leather and nylon, its popularity as a fabric only skyrocketed even further post-World War II. As for the second look, this is called Solarized Denim by Diesel, and stems from the Spring 2023 collection, which was divided into sections as well, with two important ones being denim and utility wear. This solarized denim fits into the first section and is based on the way that clothing, especially denim, will react to sun exposure over time by becoming lighter and lighter and mirroring a bleaching technique, hence the name Solarized. And this solarized pattern spans across the torso and waist in a diagonal spread and is also covered in crystals, while the jacket that Beyoncé wears over top might be a reference to a popcorn denim treatment that we saw in the Fall 2022 collection as well. Another intriguing look I wasn't expecting was a red ensemble by New York-based brand Telfar, which many now know for its famous shopping tote. The contemporary handbag label founded by Telfar Clemens does actually have a ready-to-wear line that seems to be where Beyoncé's look finds its origin. The tracksuit styles, sans, crystals, are actually still available online if you're looking to purchase them, but the exciting thigh-hole cutouts on them have been a Telfar house code since his first show, Spring 2015. They might have seemed ridiculous back then, but Clemens' perseverance and stick-with-them attitude has gotten them on one of the biggest celebrities in the world. And not to minimize Beyoncé, who has been an ardent supporter of his, but with a booming accessories business, Telfar, Beyoncé might not even be as big as accomplishment anymore, but still! She's supporting him, he's supporting her, they're loving each other, and regardless, the catsuit version of the tracksuit with full crystal embellishment is certainly a look I rather love to see. Now, there were some other big name looks in Opulence, like a Louis Vuitton damier embellished set by Beyoncé's friend Pharrell Williams, a fur coat and matching look by Fendi, and two different silver Loewe styles as well, but I think we gotta move on. Next up, there was the segment titled Anointed, which started off with a rather amazing look by the Japanese brand Encore. Their Spring 2023 collection was an amazing experience, I should know, I was there, and a viral one as well, that saw the use of UV reactive fabric by its designer Kunihiko Morinaga. The collection saw modes emerge in all white looks, with the lights changing to showcase UV beams that would change the color and motif of the clothing completely. As for Beyoncé, she incorporated the same color-changing fabric by wearing a long white robe and veil that turned from crisp white to a puzzle of colors all slotted together by different colored shapes that emerged once the UV light hit them. But the thing is, we never saw a sharded ensemble like this during the Encore show, nor the following show the next season that also included the technology, which means the look and motif is entirely custom. And now, since Beyoncé goes on to perform her song Church Girl during the Anointed section, it leads me to believe that these colored shapes are probably meant to mirror the beautiful and church-oriented art form of stained glass. So like the Holy Rollers, Beyoncé is anointing her congregation, but quickly sheds the Encore look to uncover different looks, like this Jean-Paul Gaultier style. Now, like many of the brands previously mentioned, Beyoncé has a history with Gaultier, so I'm not shocked to see it, and I can't deny that I love the crystallized zebra stripe look based on the iconic Cyber Baba Spring 1996 collection. The Cyber Baba collection is one of the most iconic by Gaultier because of its use of lines and stripes to create body illusions and contour, but also because he printed images of nude bodies on clothing and showcased them as absolutely normal. Jean-Paul Gaultier, the brand, not the man, under the creative direction of Florence Tetier, has reintroduced the morph motif, as it is called in recent years, and it has been a success, so I'm not shocked to see a crystallized version of it either. Another black and silver crystal look emerged by the British designer Richard Quinn, who is known usually for his floral prints that edge on vintage couch prints, which I think might be why Beyoncé and her team sought out Quinn's work for this section. Richard Quinn has made his mark using colorful and quite old-looking florals and full matching ensembles of gloves, shoes, stockings, and hats, all in the same motif, which might possibly reflect the importance of dressing up for women attending Sunday church services, possibly within the black community. This is reflected not only in the common phrase Sunday best, but also in the documented fashion history of the black church-going community, like how when author Alicia White spoke with Reverend Dr. Leroy Wadlington, pastor, and he explained that, quote, "I lived and grew up on a farm and church was our social outlet. You wore your best clothes and gave God your very best." Or how author Michael Cunningham of the book Crowns, Portraits of Black Women in Church Hats, is quoted as saying, "My mother was an evangelist, and she taught us that women should cover their heads out of respect for God. When I moved to North Carolina, I saw more of the fancier hats, hats with more depth and dimension." Now, Beyoncé's polka dot catsuit by Richard Quinn is a head-to-toe look with built-in pantaboots and a black silk drape bust detail, but the part that really stood out to me was the hat. The hat was created in collaboration with the millinery brand Hood London, who has dubbed it the Spacer hat, and with its wide brim and bright polka dots is intriguing, but the fact that it actually covers Beyoncé's head and has built-in eye slits is what really draws me in. Not only does the idea of the Spacer hat look a little bit like a UFO and play into elements of outer space ideas like the song Alien Superstar and the Motherboard Section, but it also continues to build on the history of black women modernizing and elevating the artistry of millinery. And the idea of wearing your Sunday best might also come in once more when we look at a luscious tuxedo bodysuit designed by one of the most notable names in American fashion, Ralph Lauren. It's rather rare to see Ralph Lauren design custom looks that stray from traditional ideas of Savile Row tailoring, but for Beyoncé, anything is possible. This cream, double-breasted shawl lapel bodysuit melds the impeccable precision of tailoring with the silhouette that Beyoncé has often performed in. And I wonder if this idea of Beyoncé donning and remixing attire traditionally worn by men might be a reference not only to black men's well-dressed history, but also the idea of playing with gender norms. See the black top hat, crystallized cane, and the feather boa that Beyoncé smartly accessorizes with. Each of these styles were popular during the 1920s, which also happened to coincide with a period called the Harlem Renaissance, which followed the emancipation of black people from slavery in the United States. The neighborhood of Harlem in New York City became a haven for art and culture amongst the black community, as well as the white community that often descended upon it to see shows and attend other events. And one of these events was called the Hamilton Lodge Ball, which began in 1869 in Harlem, but was at the peak of its popularity in the 1920s and 1930s during the Harlem Renaissance. Now, the ball saw men and women cross-dress and compete in different categories as well as party and dance together. This was the origin of ballroom culture, which is where voguing and walking in categories originates. While by today's standards, Beyoncé's outfit is quite tame and normalized, in the 1920s it was still radical for women to wear suits and especially to wear pants. And the top hat and cane were accessories well-dressed men often carried, while her feather boa brings in elements of the feminine, as black women during the period would wear them alongside their drop-waist dresses and cloche hats to round out their flapper looks. And considering Renaissance reflects ballroom culture quite heavily, I have a feeling this Ralph Lauren look might touch upon the idea of gender bending that went on during those balls, as well as the notion of black dandyism that rose out of the creativity of the Harlem Renaissance. Another element of Anointed I pondered upon was the use of white looks, like the Gaurav Gupta Infinity Crystal bodysuit, which features flowing swags of fabric that ripples across Beyoncé's bust and off her shoulder. These, alongside paint stroke-like lines, have become a signature of Gupta's brand, but something about the color white and the use of the song Virgo's Groove from the album correlated to me. Virgo is obviously an astrological sign, which Beyoncé is, but the translation for the word from Latin can either mean maiden or virgin. Virgins are often associated with the color white in reference to purity, and the Greek and Roman origins of astrology might link the finely pleated swags with the texture of traditional antiquarian garments too. That one might be a little bit of jump, but we're trying here. And while I'm being precocious, there is also the association with the goddess Astrea, who was the personification of this Virgo-ness as well as precision and purity, who was the last immortal to abandon Earth at the end of the Silver Age to go to Mount Olympus with the other gods. And I mean, there have been a lot of silver looks in this section that we already mentioned, but also we have this Miu Miu crystallized denim set, and we have a Gucci fringe bodysuit and matching coat, and we also have a ruched Ferragamo dress in a liquid-like dark gray that could definitely pass for silver. Maybe I'm looking a little bit too deep into Beyoncé's Virgo-ness, but hey, why not, right? You know what I mean? We're here. Other white looks by designers like HauteLeMode and Danielle Frankel also pushed forward this maiden and virginal notion, and when paired with the overarching theme of being anointed, it joined for a symbolic and jam-packed section. The next section of the performance is one we kind of covered in the beginning of the video, and featured the iconic trio of Loewe crystal catsuits and is titled Heated. Now listen, we again won't cover it much except to mention two other styles that emerged from it, with one being a duo of looks by Roberto Cavalli that featured red and blue flame bodysuits and matching boots, which I think perfectly plays into the song from the album titled Heated. Shocker. Another is a catsuit by British-based brand Febin that features a crystallized cacophony of gold, silver, and red motifs that run along and around her body. And now let's move on to the next segment titled Mind Control, which is the last kind of real segment, which is all about, well, a hive mindset and control. Beyoncé starts the segment by emerging wearing a custom Mugler look by Casey Cadwallader, inspired by the spring 1997 Haute Couture collection by the late Thierry Mugler himself. Again, Beyoncé loves a Mugler moment, especially when it's an iconic reference. As in the past, she's referenced a few different looks like the motorcycle corset or had entire wardrobes designed by the late couturier for her I Am tour. So asking Cadwallader and Mugler to continue that relationship is a no-brainer, especially if you're under the mind control of Beyoncé herself. Now, Beyoncé's bodysuit by Mugler is custom made and features black and yellow motifs that more than likely allude to the yellow and black stripes of a bee. Get it? Beyoncé? Bee imagery. And the headpiece is inspired by one worn during the spring 1997 Haute Couture collection, which featured a range of headpieces inspired by bugs. Now, that haute couture collection is often credited with reinvigorating the high form of dressmaking and bringing fantasy into the mix, but Beyoncé's headpiece captures the drama of the collection with her long antennas that reach almost down to her waist, depending on the headpiece, which at one point she might have broke when she dropped the headpiece on stage. Relatable girl things. The plexiglass sunglasses built into the headpiece, being a bug eye element to the style, only further envelops the audience into this idea of Beyoncé as a bee, or queen bee for that matter. Now, the section being called Mind Control might also have to do with the idea of bee colonies that have a queen, otherwise known as the queen bee, and they follow the will of the queen for the most part. And to use this analogy of bees and bring in wardrobe choices that reflect that only furthers my admiration for the work and research that went into this tour. Black and yellow styles continued as we saw a customary Catsuit look materialize in full embellishment. Now, this look is actually based on a style from Catsuit's spring 2009 collection, which saw a trompe-l'oeil effect appear on a silk look that was meant to showcase a perfume bottle. And strangely enough, Beyoncé's look doesn't just show a printed perfume bottle, but rather turns her into one with a wasp-waisted dress and matching headpiece. See what I did there? Wasp-waisted. Bam. I wasn't really understanding why she would reference a perfume bottle until I discovered that Beyoncé has actually released a perfume called C'est Noir, which means this black when translated. The bottle for C'est Noir doesn't look a whole lot like the outfit by Catsuit, but it's really the thought that counts. And while I do love the outfit, I can see maybe there is a secret message about the idea of consumerism and all that deeply embedded into the outfit and the new perfume from Beyoncé. Another set of black and yellow looks came in the form of a Balmain designed catsuit and bodysuit, which was overall yellow but utilized black lines to contour the body. An overall motif across both of these looks is faux scales that almost resemble reptile skins, which might be a reference to the conspiracy theories regarding Beyoncé and things like the Illuminati, or possibly the fact that she's a lizard person. It would play into the mind control theme and also a funny wink to her fans and also her foes. Not every look was black and yellow. Some were just singular colors like a Nicolas Joubran designed yellow bodysuit, while a black glass beaded bodysuit by Givenchy designer Matthew M. Williams is the counterpart to that. The last mind control look I want to discuss is a custom creation based on one of the best Sarah Burton Alexander McQueen collections ever. The spring 2013 collection saw Burton explore the notion of femininity and the idealization of the feminine form. And in that collection, models emerged in the normal, strict tailoring and feminine flouses, but with prints of honeycombs and embroidered gold bees covering them. And the most amazing part was the use of wide-brimmed headpieces that combine the honeycomb shapes with beekeeper helmets that cover the top half of the face of the model but still allowed the models to see through it. It was a true embrace of the Alexander McQueen ethos of showmanship by Burton, but with that restrained Burton hand guiding it. And as for Beyoncé, she took that bee reference and ran with it by wearing a black and gold crystal honeycomb dress with a black honeycomb beekeeper hat. It was and is the perfect way to reference her fandom known as the Beehive and assert herself as the queen bee of the group. Now, the last section of her Renaissance performance we'll cover is the Encore section, where Beyoncé ascends her beautiful steed and flies around the stage and the stadium. She's usually covered in sequins or crystals of some form or another and is performing the song Summer Renaissance. Looks do range from a silver Valentino off-the-shoulder dress that is customized from the spring 2023 Haute Couture collection, to a green sequin Encore bodysuit and cape, to a full silver Caperni cape with laser-cut feather-shaped silver embellishments descending down it. It's a great way to finish off an impressive show and add such a cool effect as she's lifted off into the sky. And with that, we're done explaining all of the looks from Beyoncé's Renaissance tour. Not all of them. Decent chunk. It was honestly one of the most exciting things, waiting and anticipating what outfits we were gonna see emerge as the months went on, and that's me saying that, who was never excited about anything. And I have to say a big congratulations to Beyoncé and her team of stylists. There were about 4 stylists I know that were working on the project, as well as her mother Tina. They did an amazing job. Everybody seemed to really care and love and wanted to really put together amazing outfits, and I think they did that. I loved it. I thought it was great. I love breaking down the looks. I think Beyoncé is very, very smart. I really enjoy, getting to see all the looks and what she's thinking and how she's bringing them in and building different cultural references. Please let me know what some of your favorite looks or least favorite looks from the Renaissance tour were. If I missed out on anything, I apologize. If I mixed up any information, I also apologize. I'm not like beehive, but I do my best. So I hope you guys enjoy. Go, see the Renaissance movie. I know I am. I will see you guys in the next video, and TTYL.